So, review of what happened with Yorkshire moths in 2024. It was really quite an extraordinary year. As butterfly watchers will know, there were no butterflies about. Well, there were, what happened to the moths? So, this was in The Guardian. The year has been dead. Where have all Britain's insects gone? And they suggested weather and habitat deterioration was something to do with this. It got in the BBC, didn't it? Concern over record low butterfly and moth numbers. But what happened to moths? Well, it wasn't very good for moths, really. I was deluged with emails in my inbox telling me how awful it was. All sorts of comments. As regards this year, without a doubt, it's by far the worst I've known. And this was from somebody who's been moth trapping for 40 years. So that's a significant statement. Just on and on. What a dreadful season this has been. Sorry there weren't any more records. What a dreadful year. So when all the records came in, I thought we weren't going to get very many at all. But I'm quite surprised that we had a decent number in the end. So that's the number of records per year. And we ended up with 202,000, which is not bad at all, really. Nowhere near as good as the bumper year here of 2022 with its long, hot summer. 23, of course, was pretty good, apart from July, which was awful. So if you look at it, if you look particularly at 2022 and 23, and you look at records per month, 22, which is the blue line, is a normal sort of year where you get a nice peak in July, and every previous year looks just like this. 23 was very unusual with a total lack of records in July. So what happened in 24? Well, that's what happened. Fairly normal, except a big lack of records here in June. The butterfly people tell us, don't they, that lousy weather in June is meant to be one of the main factors from low butterfly numbers. So, and not really as many records you'd expect in July. Later in the year, fairly normal, really. So, what I'd like to talk about today, we need to look at the new species that have colonised the county. We need to look at new vice county records. We need particularly to look at migrants, in particular the amazing night of the 7th of September. We need to look at species expanding the range in the county. And we look at one of the most interesting bits, which is which species did well and which did badly, and one or two other highlights. And that's probably going to take about 50 minutes all being well. So, new county records, macros. We had 2 new macro county records. The first one is this thing, Passenger. What an amazing looking moth. This is a migrant, of course. Most records along the south coast. These records, these maps I'm going to show, are the most up-to-date macro maps available. They're done by Guy Meredith, and it's accurate up to the end of 2019. The red dots are the most modern dots, 5 years before 19, then the blue, then the black, and the little black dots are old ones. So we'll show a few of those. So no records north of Norfolk. Well, we've got one here in Sheffield. Tremendous record. This is really the sort of rarity which ought only to be caught by somebody who's venerable and been trapping for a long time, you know, for example, county recorder or something. But no, it went to a lady in Sheffield who didn't know a lot about moths, found this. But bless her, she put it on social media, and eventually, a month later, it found its way to me. So well done to Sylvie for realising it was something a little bit different. The second macro county newbie is Radford's Flame Shoulder. That's one we've been expecting for a bit. Now, this, the books tell us, is a migrant. The first record in the country was 1983. Since then, there have been a lot of records along the south coast, very coastal. By 2019, there were records appearing in Suffolk. 2021, we've had records in Norfolk, and now it's turned up at Spurn at the end of October in a big migrant surge at the end of October. Well, it wasn't the only one. It kept arriving and it kept arriving, and we ended up with 13 records of 12 moths, which is quite sensational. Now, are these all migrants? Well, they probably are, but further south, a lot of people are starting to suspect that Bradford's is actually residents, and this pattern of colonisation sounds to me like a moth that's trying to colonise. Now, that's where they all occurred, mostly in the east of the county, but also as one in Kirksmitten here that Dave Williamson got new for VC63. So 2 vice counties. And as you can see, they all came right at the very end of October and into November on that phenogram. Now, Andrew Allport, who caught these in Driffield, put this very helpful picture on Yorkshire Moth's website, Facebook, a Facebook site rather, and Radford's flame shoulder on the right and flame shoulder on the left, showing the differences. And when you see them side by side, they're a lot more obvious than you think. Radford's is longer, thinner wings. The black streak extends beyond the reniform stigma here, whereas in flame shoulder, it's just a little bit of a dot. The flame, instead of being this sandy brown of flame shoulder, is a pinker colour. The stigmata are smaller, in particular the orbicular stigma there. And the contrast between the thorax and the white collar is really quite prominent. So they do look quite different beasts. And there are other differences, such as the hairs on the abdomen and the hind wing, but you have to manhandle the moth a bit to see those. So we're highly likely to see more of this thing. 6 new micros for the county. Now, these micro moth maps have been done by Martin Evans, and he's given us permission to use these. These are very up to date. The old records are the green ones, pre-2000. Next, the darker green, then the dark brown, then the olive green are post-2000. You see, this is a moth which is moving north, Evergestis limbata, and it appeared at Spurn in June. So lovely little thing. And this feeds on garlic mustard and hedge mustard, and it can be disturbed in the daytime. So places perhaps where you get orange tip, we might see more of those. So I look forward to catching up with that one. The next one is this thing, Coccylidia rupicola. Now, the map there is really quite interesting. It's fairly widespread over the whole of the British Isles, but there's a big Yorkshire-shaped gap here, isn't there? So that's just crying out for some records. It's highly likely to have been in the county for ages. But that's a lot of micros. It doesn't stray far from its food plant, in this case, Hempagrimony. Now, David Watkins, who traps at Brafferton Spring Wood, put his actinic trap in the middle of a big patch of Hempagrimony, and he caught this. And it looks rather similar to some other coccoliths. Coccoliths are quite a tricky group of tortrixes, aren't they? And it could have been, I don't know, Phalanidium madiana or something, couldn't it? But we dissected it to prove it was rupicola. Now, this thing will be elsewhere in Yorkshire. It's bound to be. So stick your trap in the middle of a patch of Hempagrimony and see if we can find some more of those. That won't be the only one in Yorkshire. The third one was this thing, Kydia conicolana. This is one of the many conifer feeding kydias, which all look the same and they all sound the same. They've got similar names. It's canicolana, coniferana, cosmophorana. Very confusing. And this turned up at Kirk Smeaton. And from the photo, we thought it was probably conicolana and dissected it and found out that it was. And this is a pine feeder. And again, looking for this map, it's moving north, isn't it? This is probably the most furtherly north that it's been recorded. So I don't think that's the last we're going to be seeing of Conicolana. Musatimanitidalis. Now then, this is an adventive species which has come from Australia and New Zealand on the fern trade. And the first record in the country was in 2009. And it spread big time, and it's spreading fast. And it got to Suffolk in 2019, Norfolk in 2020, and now we've had it. And it turned up at Spurn on the 7th of October. And everybody thought, oh, well, that's great. And then more turned up, and more turned up. And we ended up with all these. We ended up with all these records, 11 records of 13 moths. And it turned up there at Ian Hubensall had it at Rossington. I caught it with that Forest of Flowers. I was lucky to see that one. This is at the YWT Reserve Birch Wood. So it doesn't just feed on exotic garden centre ferns. It even feeds on things like bracken. So it's good news, isn't it? And it's one of these micros with a sensible micro, marbled fern. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of that. Just scoffing a bit of bracken would be good. The next one, coniphasias are dreadful things, aren't there? There are about 8 species of coniphasia that look almost identical, and you have to dissect them to be sure. Now, this is fairly new on the British list. It was only separated from Pasiuana in 2010. So a lot of these old Vice County shadings are done in retrospect from specimens that found out subsequently to be Puicana. This is the most most north it's been seen. Most people don't bother dissecting their coniphasias and just love those coniphasia species, but Andy Nunn's done a good job at Skidby, and he's dissected quite a few, and he's found this. And we ummed and ahed about the genitalia for a long time before coming to the conclusion it was Puicana, because these things are not easy, but it is Puicana. Coleophorus salinella, another tricky group, the coleophoras, aren't they? You could be forgiven for this map, thinking there's a southerly population and a northerly population. But some of these northerly Vice County records are apparently a bit dodgy. So the ones to our south are more bona fide. And lots of records recently in the north coast of Norfolk. Now, this thing feeds on grass-leaved oric and sea purslane, forming these nice cases. And there's plenty of the food plants at Sperm. And Tony Broom got a couple, and Andy Nunn dissected 2 females. So this is probably a bit more widespread than we think. So we need a good search for the cases this year. New Vice County records, well, there have been a lot of those. I mean, 9 more macro Vice County records in addition to the county records that we've shown. 32 new micro Vice County records. But this is in a bad year, don't forget. The first one is Yarrow Pug. Now, this has only been in the county since 2018. We've already got a nice population down here in the very southeast, and it's turned up in Andy Nunn's garden in Skidby this year. He was pretty sure that's what it was, but we dissected it just to be sure. So it's a good idea to dissect them when they're new for a Vice County, but it's a fairly distinctive looking bug, plenty of yarrow for it to feed on in Yorkshire, and it just appears to be gradually increasing. Another pug new for a Vice County was Haworth's pug. Now, this, of course, feeds on Clematis vitalba, traveller's joy, and that occurs down the magnesian limestone belt here, down the centre of the county, but also in VC 61, there's quite a lot of traveller's joy. So that's where you expect to get Haworth's pug. These maps, by the way, the red dots are 2024, the black dots are just simply older dots. And Robert Woods and his gang got this in Newtondale. Now, you didn't expect to find it there. I don't know how much traveller's joy there is there, but there can't be very much. But there's no doubt that's what it is. So that's a turn up. Toadflax brocade has been breeding the county probably since 2020. Nearly all our records come from the Doncaster area, from gardens. This is very much a garden moth, and that's feeding, I think, on purple toadflax, so it will feed on common toadflax. Now, one of the unwritten rules of moth trapping is when a species is going to move north into VC 62, it looks at the map and it chooses Terry Crawford's garden in Haxby. And this is the normality, because this is what always happens. And so it's done that, it's read the right books. Occasionally it turns left and it gets to Isophytus garden in York, but it's usually Terry's. So it's nice to see that normality is resumed with toadflax pug. Toadflax brocade, rather. Nymoth, or Nemoth, however you pronounce it. This is a migrant. It's the 12th Yorkshire record. Lots of migrants about this year, of course. And this was on the outside door of Marks and Spencer's in Scarborough. So quite a turn-up. I don't think it's come from Marks and Spencer's. It hasn't been imported on from food, simply food. I think it is a genuine migrant. The only one in the county this year. Wormwood, I've been confidently predicting that wormwood is becoming extinct as a moth in Yorkshire, which just shows how much I know about the situation. This map, all these little black dots here, shows where it used to occur. It's disappearing from so many areas, presumably because of our habit of tidying up the countryside and removing weedy plants like wormwood and mugwort and things. Now, this year we've had 3 records, which is really sensational. We often get none at all, occasionally get 1, but it's a long time since we've had 3. And it's certainly been Rotherham here. Mike Smith has got it in Rotherham. John Cooper got this one in Bramley. And Jessica Bone got this on the outside of a shed door in Fulford in York. I couldn't believe in that. Believe it or not, it's a first for VC 62. Now, a species that is apparently declining and disappearing, for it to move north is rather unusual. And I know that looks as if it's in VC61. You're going to have to believe me. That's 100 yards inside the VC62 boundary. The boundary is the thing of convoluted beauty in the York area. So a tremendous record. Clancy's Rustic. You may remember Alan Rodder caught that the year before at Ford and Chalk Banks, new for Yorkshire. Very exciting. We wondered, were we going to get any more? Well, we certainly did get more. We got more, and two at Spurn there. It turned up in VC63 at two places. Samantha Batty got it at Austerfield, and it turned up at Swinefleet. Mike Billsworth got it at Swinefleet the same night. And it followed the right road map. It went to Terrace Garden in Haxby as well. So we're going to see a lot more Clancy's Rustic in this to come. That's a tremendous year. 10 records of 11 moths, and that's why it's turned up. The majority at Spurn, but I think this can now turn up almost anywhere in the county. Crescent Dart. This is a ridiculous moth. It's a moth of rocky coastlines of the south and west of the country. It's no business to be in Yorkshire at all. This sole dot here is one at Great Ayton in 2009. What it was doing there, I don't know. But I mean, two records since then in 2021 in VC62. And this year, we've had two more records. This one was posted on a Facebook group, which I was lucky enough to see. Newson on Ouse, 28th of July. That's a VC62 one. This appeared on the dreaded iNaturalist and then iRecord. I can't get any more details. I know where and when, but I can't get in touch with the people that recorded it. So if they're listening, I'd love you to keep in touch. This is half the problem with online recording. If you don't really keep your eye on the ball, I could have easily missed all these records. The South Elmsall one was put down as 10th of August and 12th of August. Two photos submitted. They look to me to be the same moth. So I've only counted them as one record. Pale Oak Beauty. Well, no, this hasn't been in the county for very long at all. It's been here since 2015. Gradually, slowly increasing its range. We get 1 or 2 records a year. We've had 4 records this year. That really is very good indeed. Now, there's another unwritten rule of moth trapping, which is if the species is going to invade VC65, it goes to my garden here first. And most moths realise that and do that. But Pale Oak Beauty has had different ideas, and Least Carpet did the same and turned up at What's Good cover last year. I really must have a word with them about this, but no, seriously, I'm quite delighted that they've caught it because it's a really good moth to get, and it's undoubtedly Pale Oak Beauty because the hindwing has got this pale centre dark dot, and it's a great big thing, and it flies early. No, actually, 14th of May is early for Pale Oak Beauty. I think it's the earliest Pale Oak Beauty in the county. And look how far it's a huge range extension. And that's 50, 60 kilometres. So very unexpected. So if it can do that, where else can it turn? So that's the last macro vice county record. We've got a lot of micro vice county records. If I was going to talk about those, we'd be here all night. But I'd like to talk about just 2 or 3. Caloptilia honoratella. This has only been in Yorkshire for 2 years, and it's run riot this year. It's not the easiest moth to identify. I have a lot of Caloptilias, but if it's fresh and you get a good photo, you can be reasonably certain that we've dissected quite a few of these. This forms cones, leaf rolls on the tips of sycamore leaves in just the same way that Caloptilia rufipernella does. So you can't tell them apart, but the early mines are very different. Honoratella has this silvery branching line like this, very distinctive thing, and that's turned up or been recognised 4 or 5 times. But all those dots this year, I mean, that's a moth that's really spreading rapidly. Another Caloptilia is semi-fascia. It's another Acer-feeding Caloptilia. It's tricky to identify again. If you get a typical photo like that, it's all right, but it does have various different forms. Now, this forms cones and rolls on the tips of field maple and Norway maple, but that's not diagnostic. You need to see the adult because, particularly with things like Honoratella, that can use field maple and Norway maple as well. So that's turned up in all over the place. It hasn't got to 65 yet. That's not 65. That's actually a 64 dot. So that's that one unlike Honoratella, has avoided my garden so far. And here's one you can look out for at the moment. We used to think this was an incredibly rare moth in Yorkshire, Phyllorypta ulicicolella. It mines gorse stems, and I spent years, 2 or 3 years looking for this and failed. And the reason was I was looking in the wrong places. Find a gorse, find a little thin, wispy, useless looking stems at the bottom or around the back. They're looking quite long, not the thick, juicy, flowering ones, these little thin, wispy ones. And look for an area of darker colouring, brown or pale green, or something that just looks different, not the dark green of the stem. And take off a bit, getting hardly prickled in the process, stick it in your pocket, get even more prickled, take it home and just de-roof it with a pin. And if you de-roof the brown bit, you'll get a lot of what looks like sawdust, and that's the frass, and you follow it up to the paler green bit, and here's the larva. I found this in several places this year, and it's a great time of year now to look for it when there's not much about. So see how many more dots we can add, and that's been found in 9 places this year for something we thought was an incredible rarity. So, migrants. Now, migrants are really the story of the year, and in particular, the 7th of September. 7th of September was a day that possibly one of the most remarkable days in the history of Yorkshire mothing. Remember, this is in a bad year. And to put it in perspective, a small mottled willow is an unusual migrant. There were no records at all in 23, no records at all in 21. I've seen 2 or 3 in my time moth trapping. The first records was a small influx in 1903. We've had 182 records on the database, 193 moths. So you catch one at a time, don't you? Somebody once caught 3 in a trap, which was really quite sensational. We had a bit of an influx in the great migrant year of 2006, and that brought 76 records, 79 moths. Amazing. But again, all single moths. On the night of the 7th of September, in a small back garden in Scarborough, in a couple of small traps, Alan Rodder got 228. 228. He retired to bed eventually, so there were probably a lot more than that. Robert Woods at Gisborough, 5 miles inland, got 70. Keith Clarkson at Hunmanby Gap got 63. Other people got big numbers. Look at those sites. They're all localised. They're all localised to the same area. The weather was easterly winds. It was a muggy night. It was a funny night. Lots of people didn't even bother to put the moth trap on because they thought nothing would arrive. It was drizzly, murky, and the moths had come off the sea, hit this bank of cloud and whatever, and fallen out of the sky. And birders are used to this phenomenon, and they call it a fall of migrant birds, a fall of migrant warblers. We don't think of there being a fall of moths, but this was the only time I can ever remember it happening, a fall of moths. They didn't just occur there, like the bigger numbers. They occurred in all these places on the nights of the 7th of September. You expect migrants to turn up in big numbers at Spurn, don't you? Well, Easington had 6, Kinsey had a couple, but really quite small numbers. Absolutely astonishing. And that night, 471 small mottled willows appeared at 30 sites. And that's a map of what happened by the end of the year. Phenogram shows this big surge, 7th of September, and a few hung about for a week or 2 after. By the 1st of October, they'd all gone. 607 moths, and just one trap contained more than had ever been caught in the previous 120 years. It's difficult to get your head around, isn't it? But it wasn't just small mottled willow. Convolvulus hawk moth is a commoner migrant, really, or perhaps it's just more showy, so people report it. And our database has got the best part of 500 records on. But again, just 533 moths. So this is a moth that you get singly. You catch one convolvulus hawk moth, and it makes you for the whole year. That's your one convolvulus moth. It's just wonderful. It's people give the hind teeth for one. Somebody once caught 5 in a trap, which was sensational. Keith Clarkson at Hunmanby Gap got 39. There were probably more. He was hit on the head by them. He saw them flying overhead. They were just everywhere. His MV trap had virtually none. His actinic trap by the side of the house had masses in. The side of the wall of the house was plastered in these things. There were just a few of them there. He ran out of containers to put them in, and in exhaustion retired to bed at 2:30. If he'd stayed up a bit longer, he'd have got the record for the country, which stands at 42 at Church Cove in Cornwall by Mark Tunmore. But Church Cove got that. It always gets fantastic migrant, but I'm going to big up almost the most ever convolvulus hawk moth recorded. And the next year was pretty good. I don't think he's had his trap on, but Damien Money did at Skelton, and he got 9 at Skelton. Look at that, 9 convolvulus hawk moths together. Wouldn't you just love that? And looking back, there'd been a few on the 6th, but Keith had 5 on the 6th. But by the 7th, all those turned up, and by the 8th, a lot more. So absolutely sensational numbers, and that's where they all appeared. And you can see they're mostly coastal, they've drifted inland. So I mean, I think that's Peter Smith at Winterset. That's Jill Warwick at Sharrow got one. But this big surge in September and tailing off gradually. So by the beginning of October, they're virtually all gone. And it wasn't just those 2 species. There was a supporting cast, and those are all the migrants that arrived that night. Clifton Lamprey, you're never quite sure if they're migrants or resident nowadays. 19 scarce border straws, that's a lot in a night. 40 Rushford-ears, a lot in a night. Palpita vitrialis, 14 is incredible, but Palpita vitrialis had the most amazing year. This is really been a rare migrant. But you look at this graph, we normally get 3 or 4. We had quite a few last year, but this year, 197 Palpita vitrialis arrived. And that certainly wasn't just coastal, it was all over the place. I mean, I'm here, I got 4 of the things. This is by Ingleton, they turned up over there. And okay, they came in early September, but they also came with a second migrant surge here in last week in October. Absolutely incredible. Was this a one-off, or are we going to see a lot more of these things? Scarce bordered straw, we had an amazing influx of moths in 2006, and had about 400 of them. But this was the second biggest influx of scarce bordered straw. Again, the September the 7th influx, the October the 25th influx there. Amazing. And the October the 25th influx brought 2 second for the county, a couple of interesting pyralids, which are close relatives of each other. Diasemiopsis rhomborealis at Samantha Botty at Austerfield, and the very same night in Upper Wharfdale at Skyholme, Spolidea recurvalis. Paul Miller, I couldn't believe his luck when he got that, because Upper Wharfdale isn't the sort of place you expect to find exciting migrants. Incredible happenings. And that wasn't all. We had the Yorkshire's 4th many line 2 days before the main influx. Yorkshire's 8th auroch moth the night before the influx. Yorkshire's 9th beautiful marbled a week or so later. We've talked about the knee moth. Golden twin spot turned up in Calderdale. That's a 22nd record, but a really good thing to get in Calderdale. So the most incredible migrant season. And this was another one. Euchromius ocellia is really an extremely scarce migrant. Very few Yorkshire records in the past, but 9 records of 10 moths. And they virtually all came between the 21st and the 23rd of September. 8 out of those 9 records. The 10th one, which was 3 weeks later, read the road map and ended up in Terry's Garden here in Haxby. That's what it did to you. Other interesting moths, well, there have been a lot. We could talk about all sorts, but here are the big highlights. And the moth of the year that I think the most exciting event possibly of the year is frosted green. Now, old 19th century records don't appear on this map, but Porritt knew of 3 records in his 1883 lists in Yorkshire, but nothing was seen since, so we assumed this moth had just disappeared. It made me prick up my ears when in 2011, some were found here in the very west of Northumberland near the Cumbria border. A few years later, it was rediscovered in Cumbria. It just made me think, surely it's not lurking still in Yorkshire somewhere. And I put out an alert that people should be looking for this. Now, Alistair Fitter trapped in Prettywood on the 6th of April, and he found 4. He went back a month later, and he found 4. This isn't a migrant or a thing expanding its range. This thing has been hiding for 140 years under our very noses. It's a moth of ancient oak woodland. Ancient oak woodland is the most valuable habitat. And what else is hiding there? Where else is frosted green hiding? I cannot believe it only exists at Pretty Woodman Castle Howard's estate. This is a sensational finding, it really is. Other good things, cloak carpet. Cloak carpet's been in the county. Well, the first county record was 2017 at Osterfield. We've got two more. It turned up at Sheffield and it turned up at Midgley, both in VC 63, and the finders realised what it was. All credit to them. Its scientific name is biangulata, isn't it? It's got these two pointy angles on the outside of its median fascia. There's no reason why we shouldn't get more. And it's spread north. It feeds on stitchworts, and there's not a stitchwort for it to feed on. Jersey tiger has got a foothold in the south of the county. That's our third and fourth county records. We had one the previous year, so this is something we're going to see more of. Scarlet tiger. We've had regular records now for the Forester flowers and from Bedingborough, but three new sites this year: South Otterington, which is not far south of Northallerton, and Midgley and Sheffield in VC 63. And we know it's breeding because that's a pair in copper, the Forester flowers. So that's had a fabulous year. Lesser spotted pinion is an old elm feeding moth, which we get down the magnesian limestone belt. It doesn't occur in Calderdale as far as we know, so that's miles from any of the records nearby, and it doesn't occur over the border in Lancashire. So this is a moth that you have to search for, and it doesn't come readily to light, a bit like lunar spotted pinion. That's a great record. Small brindled beauty is another moth of ancient oak woodland, and we went 20 years without having a record in Yorkshire, but one turned up last year, 23, at Ashbury pasture, and Alistair Fletcher and his gang got this again at Pretty Wood. Now, this thing is out now, and it's not got a long flight period, and it flies in the first half of February. And there are going to be some warm nights, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night are worth trapping. This is the time to stick your trap in some old oak woodland somewhere, and it might not be VC 62. I think it probably occurs in other places. I might well have a go. So a very under-recorded species. Argentine sable is a very showy day-flying species, isn't it? We know it occurs at Bishop Wood. It's been seen at Bowdenby, not for a few years now, but it probably still occurs there. But apparently it doesn't occur anywhere else in the county, but yes, it does, because it's been found in the middle of VC 63. Now, the exciting thing about this is this bit of private woodland is 2 or 3 miles from where it was found in the 1960s. So again, it's highly likely that this very showy day-flying thing has been hiding under our noses for 60 years. It just shows how much we know about moths in Yorkshire. Oak lutestring, one turned up at Pretty Wood in 2023, the first for VC 62. We thought, one oak lutestring, fabulous, that's a brilliant record. 44 at the same site. Amazing. And they were all in one little area of Pretty Wood. Traps in other parts of the wood didn't catch any. Where else does this occur? It's a moth of old oak woodland again. It must occur at other sites. What's happened to Clifton Nonpareil this year? Well, it seems rather churlish to be disappointed. We only had 34 records of 40 Clifton Nonpareil. Very difficult to know how many of these nowadays are migrants, how much are residents. There was a big surge, wasn't there, on the 7th of September, so some of those coastal records are going to be migrants, but a lot of the inland records, I think, are resident now. I think it's resident in my area, I've had a couple of years in a row, and this is a sort of front, isn't it? It's just gone beyond that. So that's Clifton Nonpareil. Delicate is another one that all the books will tell you is a migrant species, and a lot of it is, and a lot of it comes in with migrant surges. But I'm pretty sure it's resident in the county now, and I think a lot of these records are residents, particularly some of the inland ones. I mean, like all Wainscots, it's a grass feeder, so it doesn't depend on anything particular to feed upon. And that has had a most sensational year looking at that graph. White point, again, some books will tell you that's a migrant, but this is undoubtedly a resident of the country. Again, had an absolutely sensational year, 140 or so records. And that hasn't arrived with migrant surges. That's come peak at the end of August and before it all started in September. And this is a typical map of a colonizing species. This Ingleton record's a bit of an oddity. I think that's come from a different direction, but otherwise, this is the sort of front of white point as it pushes north and west. A lot of people have seen that for the first time this year. Chocolate tips decreased after increasing remarkably until 2022. But I show this slide for the interesting reason that along the front, the front of colonisation, where you've got new records in the Keighley area and in VC 62, plenty of records on the advancing front. Not so many where it used to be common further south. And this is very similar to the slide I showed last year. And this is a case of parasitoids catching up with it, and it trying to outrun its parasitoids. Black Arches has had really quite a sensational year. And this is one that hasn't outrun its parasitoids yet. It's turned up in all sorts of new places. And all those records of Black Arches this year, that's an exponential rise almost, isn't it? It's been an incredible year for early and late dates. Every year you would expect 10, 20, 25 species to fly on their earliest late date or the latest date. But this year's been quite unusual in that 47 macro species have flown on their earliest ever date. And this is just a sample of them. And things like all the prominence, I'm prominent, that's a smaller prominence, all of the first week of April, ridiculously early. Water carpet in February. Things coming out at really silly times. We had an early February, didn't we? So I can almost understand that. One or two species flew on their earliest and their latest ever dates. Water carpet, that's a smaller prominence. Privet hawk moth, large yellow underwing even, and this is the ones that flew on the latest ever date. So 31 macro species flew on their latest ever date. This is 31 of the common species. We're not counting things with fewer than 10 records or migrants or things like this. These are proper resident species. So, I mean, large yellow underwings flown from the 9th of April to the 24th of December, for goodness sake. And that's going to be here all year round if it keeps on like that. And there's some really stupid records here. Water carp, 30th of November. Can you believe that? Garden tiger, 2nd of November. I mean, I didn't believe that till I saw the photos. Seeing is believing, isn't it? Yellowtail in November. And there were 4 or 5 records of yellowtail in the last week of October as well. Pebble hook-tip, 5th of November. Very strange. But there was some unseasonably warm weather in the first week of November. It all disappeared by mid-November. It suddenly got colder, didn't it? So I thought that was all rather interesting. But I think the most interesting thing is which moths are doing well and which are doing badly in the county. So we had no records at all of forester. Now, that's the first time for 14 years we've had no forester records. It's the first time for 24 years we've had no tawny shears records. It's the first time for 35 years we've had no records of rosy wave at sperm. What on earth has happened to those 3 species? The other ones, they're species that do occasionally miss years anyway, but you would expect to have records. It was the worst ever year for so many species. I've just been writing down a report and going through the noctuids, and about 10 noctuid species in a row. I was writing, this is the worst year ever, this is the worst year ever, this is the worst year ever. And these are the lowest ever numbers. And this is going back 20 years ago, of course, there were very few records. So if something had its lowest ever number for 20 years, that means it really, really has had low numbers. Just 1 record of Pallas minor, 1 of crescent stripe, 2 of Blomer's rivulet, 3 of golden plusia. We're losing golden plusia as a species. Dark marble carpet's fallen off a cliff. What's happened to antler? Hardly any white line darts. If you convert this to percentage terms. And if you look at the previous 5 years, averaging them out and see what there was in 24, so to see what percentage things have increased compared with what you'd expect, you get this. Hours minor down 93%. Presence drive down 89%. Now, I do this every year, and it's a bad year when something decreases by 70%. But you've got these things decreasing 80, 90%. These are huge, huge decreases. Now, you may or may not have noticed, if you look at this list, the vast majority are noctuids. Now, okay, a bleak carpet isn't, but a bleak carpet is a statistical aberration because there's no longer a Rothamsted trap at Waldrop used to catch vast numbers of a bleak carpet. So I don't think that counts. There's only mottle grey in that list, which isn't a noctuid. And they tend to be species flying in the second half of the year. And there are a lot more just off the bottom of that list. So noctuids flying in the second half of the year, all of which overwinter as eggs or small larvae, did appalling. Why? And you look at some of these graphs, it's incredible, isn't it? I mean, you expect Antler to get 600 records. We had 50. What on earth is going on? But you look at it again, and the year before wasn't very good, was it? So that's just on the back of it. Well, perhaps that's just a statistical aberration. What about feather Gothic? The only year ever I've not had a feather Gothic in my garden. And again, actually, it's just a continuation of the year before, isn't it? And white line dart, dreadful, dreadful year for white line dart on the coast. But it wasn't that good the year before. And you could do graphs for all these species, and it shows the same sort of thing. It isn't just looking for weather in 2024, which has impacted on these moths. I think the course of this, it may well be the same for butterflies, goes back further. And I strongly suspect all this goes back to the hot summer of 2022, when larvae were parched, the vegetation was parched, and I think this is a huge knock-on effect for 2 years. And I only just come to this conclusion last week when I started doing these slides, because I was thinking it was due to wet weather early in the year and things like this. But if it was wet weather, you would expect those with underground pupae overwintering to have done really badly. But they didn't. They did averagely. And it was the highest ever number of 45 macro species. Now, you would expect the highest ever number of something, wouldn't you? Something always has the highest ever number. You might expect 10, you might expect 20. You wouldn't expect 45 macro species to have their highest ever number. It's ridiculous in a year when things are appearing in low numbers. But it's true. Now, you look at this list, and how many noctuids can you see? You can't see very many. And a lot of them are geometrids. Why? I have trouble getting my head around all this. And you put this in percentage terms. These are species that are none the best. Now, we've talked about some of these already, haven't we? We've talked about black arches, white pointed, Clifton nonpareil. Clifton nonpareil, I know that it went down, but compared to the previous 5 years, it actually went up. Tree lichen beauty is a new colonist, and that's doing fantastically in the south and east of the county. It hasn't increased its range, but lots and lots of records. Least carpet increasing, sycamore, orange footman, these are all things we know are increasing. So you can take those out of the equation, really. But some of these others, I mean, oak tree pug. This is oak tree pug. I thought this was due to the fact that people were recognising it better because they all had bulbs to identify, could tell it from brindle bug, but it's not, because I'm getting loads in my garden and I never used to. But again, you look, and last year was quite a good year as well, wasn't it? So it's just an exaggeration of what went on the year before. And you look at narrowing pug, not a species that you think would go up or down in numbers, it's a heather feeding upland thing, but up to 200 records, which is really quite sensational. And again, it did well the year before. Yellow-barb brindle, what on earth has happened to yellow-barb brindle? We used to get 100 records a year, we got over 300 now. And you could show the same graph for a lot of these species. And again, this is something that's not just happened the last year. This is something, it's a knock-on effect from something. But a lot of these, not these, they're all the geometries, aren't they? A lot of them overwinter as eggs and small larvae. And a lot of them are thorns. If you look at, if I can find the right slide, there are 4 species, all 5 species, all 5 late species of thorns had their best ever year. So that's August and September and dusky and canary shouldered, all had, and feathered, all had incredible years. All those had overwintered as pupae. They're the early flying ones. That's purple thorn, early thorn, lunar thorn, all the very average years. But if you look at the late flying ones, September thorn. I mean, don't forget this is a moth that's classified NT, near threatened. It's in big trouble. But look what's happened the last couple of years. August thorn, the biggest number of records ever of August thorn, the biggest number of records ever of canary shouldered thorn. Dusky thorn is a near threatened species. If you go back to the Rothamsted data, which we were all fed in 20 years or so ago, this is the moth that was most in trouble in the whole country with a 99% decrease. What's going on? But again, it isn't something that just happened this last year. Anyway, all this has tended to pose probably more questions than it's answered, but it certainly got me thinking, what a curious year. And all these records, of course, are now on the Yorkshire Moth website. If your records don't appear on the website, it means that I haven't got them. So do send them in. It's not too late. I'll do another upload later in the year. So I've just about run out of steam, and I think you've probably all heard enough. And so that's all, folks.